don't think anything's been shown.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the November 7th, 2022 meeting of the Menlo Park Planning Commission. We are glad you've decided to join us this evening. I want to particularly welcome our newest commissioner, Jennifer Schindler, to her first meeting. Welcome. And we now have a full complement of 7 commissioners serving. Established by state law, our planning commission is composed of 7 volunteer voting age residents of Menlo Park appointed to 4-year terms by the city council. Our planning commission is not a policy setting body. That is the city council. We are a policy implementing body. We review development proposals on public and private lands for compliance with our city's general plan and zoning ordinance. These can be found on the city website. The commission reviews all development proposals requiring a use permit, architectural control, variance, minor subdivision, and environmental review associated with these projects. The commission is the final decision-making body for these applications unless appealed to the city council. The commission also serves as a recommending body to the city council for major subdivisions, rezonings, conditional development permits, zoning ordinance amendments, general plan amendments, and the environmental reviews and below market rate or BMR housing agreements associated with those projects. We work in close partnership. We greatly rely on, especially this evening, the staff of our city's planning division, which is responsible for coordinating the enforcement of the city's zoning ordinance and related policies concerning applications for residential, commercial, and industrial development projects. If this is your first time joining the Planning Commission meeting this evening, we are very glad you are here, and we encourage your active participation, whether you're an applicant or interested member of the public. For the first time since moving to remote Planning Commission meetings at the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, we are moving back to in-person meetings. This is a hybrid meeting, so please bear with us tonight as we work through integrating those present in person and those participating remotely. I will turn to this evening's clerk, which I think is Chris Turner. Do I have that right? Yes. To explain how members of the public can participate during public comment periods this evening.
Alrighty, thank you, Chair DeCarty. Regarding the procedures for communicating tonight for our first hybrid meeting, the commissioners that are remote will have their webcams on for the duration of the meeting. For those presenting on an item on tonight's agenda, we ask that you also turn on your microphone and webcam during the presentation portion of your item. A member of staff will assign you keyboard and mouse controls if you are displaying a presentation. We then kindly ask that you turn off your webcam and microphone when done with the presentation, unless called upon by the chair. During the public comment period, members of the public will have an opportunity to share their comments or questions by clicking the hand icon on your screen if you're participating via Zoom, upon which staff will introduce you and activate your microphone. If you're calling into tonight's meeting, please click *9 on your keypad to notify staff that you have a comment. If multiple people are speaking from the same account, please let us know at the beginning of your item, and at the beginning of your time, we will make sure each person gets a chance to speak. For the commissioners in person today, you do not need to be logged on to Zoom. Just talk normally. Al will follow you as you speak. With that, turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Al is a video conferencing system that they have here in the conference room where we're seated. So thanks, Mr. Turner. With that, I'm going to turn to agenda item B, which is roll call. I'll ask each commissioner who I was going to ask you to unmute yourself. I think that's already been done, but to verbally respond. And I will attempt to do this in alphabetical order. So Commissioner Barnes.
I love the software. That looks really good. I'm here in person, and it's good to be with everyone finally.
Fabulous. Commissioner Doe.
I'm present. Good evening, everyone.
Vice Chair Harris.
I'm also here, present. Good to see everybody.
Commissioner Riggs.
Present and good evening.
Commissioner Schindler.
Present.
Fabulous.
Honor and pleasure to be here.
And welcome. Commissioner Tate, we know is not going to be in person and may be able to join later on by Zoom, but is not here at the moment. And I am the chair, Chris DeCarty. My pronouns are he, him. And with that, we've got 6 of 7 commissioners present this evening. I will now turn to item C, and that is for reports and announcements with acting principal planner for our city, Karina Sandmeyer. Sandmeyer, welcome.
Good evening, Chair DeCarty and Commissioners. I don't have any updates today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any commissioners? All right. Seeing none, I will close item C, reports and announcements, and we will move to public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda and items listed under the consent calendar. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda items brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. I will turn it over to Mr. Turner to walk us through public comment.
Again, so if you'd like to give public comment via Zoom, please click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. I did forget to mention, if you are in person and would like to give public comment, we do have public comment cards at the front of the room here. If you fill one out, we will make sure you are able to give your public comment. At the moment, I don't see any hands raised.
All right.
If we're
There are no cards submitted in the room and there are no hands raised. So with that, I'm going to close item D, which is public comment. We'll move to item E, which is our consent calendar. We have one item, item E1, which is to consider and adopt a resolution to approve architectural control for exterior modifications to the front and rear facades of an existing commercial building at 628 Santa Cruz Avenue. That's in the SP ECRD, the El Camino Real Downtown Specific Plan Zoning District. So with the consent calendar, the first thing we do is ask if any commissioner would like to pull that item from the consent calendar for question or discussion. All right, seeing none, I then, in communication with Ms. Sandmeyer earlier today, we are going to open public comment for this item because it's not minutes, it's actually an architectural control item. And then once we come back from public comment, we'll move to voting on approval of the consent calendar. So with that, Mr. Turner, let me open public comment on item E, which is our consent calendar this evening.
all right. Again, if you would like to give public comment, please click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen or fill out the comment card if you're here in person. Maybe we give it a minute. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Still none?
Still none.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment on item E, which is our consent calendar, E1 this evening. And with that, bring it back to the proverbial dais, where we will now entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Riggs has a first.
Well, first, I just want to mention that although it's been about 10 years, I was the architect for the adjacent building at 622.
Right next door. Excellent.
And other than appreciating under city guidelines that the facades attempt to associate with each other adjacent, which is very nice, I will indeed move to make the resolution to approve.
Second, we have a first from Commissioner Riggs, a second.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Harris. Any discussion? I guess actually there is none. So with that, we'll move to a vote. Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Schindler.
Yes.
Commissioner Tate is not here still. I will also vote yes, so the resolution, excuse me, the consent calendar passes 6 votes to 0. We will now move to item F this evening, which is public hearing. We have 2 items. The first item is item F1. This is consider and adopt a resolution to deny a variance to exceed the maximum building coverage above limits set by the R1U Single Family Urban Residential Zoning District and applicable allowances in chapter 16.79 regarding construction of accessory dwelling units. And 2, a use permit revision to modify a previously approved use permit and construct a new covered patio at 6 Greenwood Place. So that's what we have before us, and I believe it's Ms. Khan who is,
This one's me.
Mr. Turner, I apologize. I
No
got
worries.
it flipped.
Um,
Mr. Turner.
yeah, thank you, Chair DeCardi and Commissioners. I do not have any updates for the staff report, but happy to take questions. This time.
Any questions before we move to hear from the applicant, any commissioners? Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Turner. As I look at the conclusion of the staff report, it states that if a, and I'm gonna read this out loud so that I can verbalize it. If a variance is not granted, the corresponding use permit would be out of compliance with the zoning ordinance. Therefore, staff recommends the planning commission adopt a resolution denying the variance to further exceed the maximum building coverage for the proposed covered patio and denying the use permit revision to construct modifications to the previously approved use permit. What is that? What position? So what becomes then the status of the use permit revision? If I can understand that better.
In what's status? Sorry, but, understand the question.
So if they don't, if there's a non-approval, excuse me, if there's a recommendation to deny, then denying the use permit revision to construct modifications to the previously approved use permit, the result of denying it is that they simply don't proceed with those modifications. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's the sum total.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Chair.
Yeah, of course. Commissioner Riggs.
Thank you, and I also have a question for Mr. Turner. On page 3, it does indicate that an ADU, the presence of an ADU can expand both the creation of an ADU can expand both the lot coverage and the building area. It also explains, I believe, that the attached ADU has to be part of, if I understand it, the original building permit. So am I interpreting that the owner of a house built in, say, 1965 cannot have an attached ADU because they cannot apply for it since the building is already built?
No, so the way it works is an ADU, if you are proposing to exceed the maximum floor area limit and or building coverage, needs to be applied for concurrently with or after an existing or proposed main dwelling unit. So you're able to add an ADU to any existing property. If there was a house there built in the 50s, 60s, that's built at the maximum floor area limit, under state law, you're able to build an ADU up to 800 square feet. It doesn't need to be complied for at the same time necessarily, just concurrently with or after, just the ADU can be built concurrently with or after.
All right, so if I have a 150 square foot junior ADU and want to expand it to a 400 square foot junior ADU 2, 3, 4 years later, it's the expansion of an existing ADU that is a problem?
It's the expansion of the main residence. That's an issue.
All right,
Yeah.
so the ADU itself can be expanded, but in this application, the building lot coverage is serving the main house. And therefore, the covered space is marked against the main house.
Correct.
All right, and we've already looked at the possibility of assigning that covered space to the ADU.
We didn't look at it. There's no direct access from the ADU to the proposed covered porch. It is pretty clearly meant to serve the main residence.
Agreed. Thank you.
Commissioner Harris?
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm completely understanding. So if the applicant had built the ADU concurrently with the patio or the covered patio, then it would have been allowed. The reason it's not being allowed is because they did the ADU and then they're coming back to get the covered patio. Is that correct? Because when they take off the, whatever it is, 484 square feet for the attached ADU, they would have had enough room for the patio, covered patio, correct?
It depends. You are correct if they did build a patio concurrently with the ADU conversion addition, that would have been okay. Had they not done the conversion, the ADU conversion, the house was already at the maximum building coverage, so they wouldn't have been able to.
But because they reduced the main house coverage by building the ADU, they would have had enough square footage available to them to build the covered patio had they done it at the same time.
Correct.
So the reason that they cannot do it is because they waited to do the covered patio a year later. Is that correct?
Correct.
Commissioner Schindler?
So I have a clarification. I want to clarify my understanding. And then a request for more detail on the timing nuance of this particular ordinance. So is it correct to think about the permission to be over on floor area and site coverage as an attribute of the ADU only, not as an attribute of all of the property, all of the buildings on the property? That's my read of this, and I want to be sure that I'm thinking about this correctly.
Yes, essentially. So building coverage and floor area is calculated for all structures on a property. There aren't two buckets. Everything, counts as floor area or building coverage. ADUs are not exempt. They're just allowed to exceed the maximum building coverage and or floor area for the lot, but only the ADU portion. Any part of the main residence can't exceed that maximum building coverage and floor area. Main residence has to conform to whatever the maximum is for that lot, and then the ADU can exceed.
So is it correct to say that the ADU is essentially the permission for the overage?
Yes.
And then, can you comment on the sequencing, right? So the ADU happening at concurrent with or after the primary residence? What is the logic? What are we trying to sort of prevent with that particular sequencing?
So that portion is almost directly from state law. When we wrote the ordinance, we basically modeled it almost word for word. Not quite, but a little, mostly word for word from state law. Basically, we understood that there would be times when there would be new development on a property. And that we would have to allow an exceedance for an ADU. So that's where the concurrent development came from. And then we knew that there were going to be situations when there was existing development that wasn't going to be demolished or redeveloped in any way. That was probably at the maximum floor area limit. But under state law, we have to allow for an ADU to be developed up to 800 square feet, even if the maximum have been developed at this point. So that's where the concurrent and current or after development of main residence and other structures wording comes from. In our view, when the ordinance was developed, it really was to spur development of ADUs and not necessarily to be used to max out on other aspects of the development. We had to allow it if the development is concurrent. And then max out on the main house essentially, while developing an ADU, but that wasn't the intent of the ordinance or the state law really.
Thank you.
Other clarifying questions before we go to the applicant? We can go to the applicant, public comment, of course, there can be further clarifying questions as well after that. All right, with that, I will turn over to the applicant. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Blythe. I'm the owner at 6 Greenwood, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear our side of it. And Chris is done a good job of explaining it, but at the bottom line to me as the owner is exactly what the vice chair got at. It's all about timing, and we built the house. We built the ADU. I said, wait a second, we need to make this part of the house part of the ADU because it's contiguous with that space. And that made sense at the time. And we wanted to build out the patio, but we thought, budgetary reasons, let's just do one at a time. And we got it all done. And we said, hey, we can still afford to do the patio. Let's do the patio. Came back and Chris says, should have done it at the same time. I said, where is that in the rules? Where's that in the code? I don't see that anywhere. And he said, well, it's not really in there. We just kind of have always done it that way. So that was kind of frustrating to hear. And now I understand the planning department is warning residents when they come back and say, hey, you realize what you're going to do is a one-way street. You won't be able to come back to the planning commission. We weren't given that information. So we happily trundled down this path and here we are. The one thing that we're not trying to do, and I think it's clear if you look through the 27 pages of documents, we're not trying to maximize the size of the house. We're not trying to maximize the ADU. We added 174 square feet of ADU and took about 170.8 square feet of the main house as in part of that ADU. And now we're trying to cover this patio, which happens to be exactly the same square footage of what we lost. So the main house will become the same square footage as it was originally, but just with an ADU. So it's I think very straightforward. At the end of the day, we're just trying to get the house back that we had before we built the ADU. And for timing, we wouldn't be sitting here and having this discussion. So, you know, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of numbers being passed around. All that is, I think, clouding the bottom line issue, which is simply we covered this, or we took this part of the house and now we want to put it back over here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarification.
Great, thank you. Any questions or clarifications for the applicant at this time? Or we could open public comment, come back. Vice Chair Harris.
A question. What are you using the ADU for currently?
My wife and I both grew up here in town, and my parents are 90 and 91. Her parents her mom is 80. It's for them as soon as they need it. And right now we're using it as our space, but it's for either my parents or my in-law.
Any other questions? All right, why don't we move to public comment? And double duty, Mr. Turner, thank you for leading us through public comment.
No worries. So if you would like to give public comment on this item, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you're in person, please fill out a comment card. And I don't see any raised hands at the moment, but give it a second.
Yeah, let's give it a second. Done?
Still no hands.
All right, We will go ahead and close public comment. So that brings us back to the planning commission for questions, comment, discussion, and ultimately a motion. Who would like to begin? Vice Chair Harris.
So I didn't know about this rule either, and. You know, there's two sides, right? Like we want to make sure that we are, well, actually, we're trying to build ADUs because we want more housing. And if we do things that prevent the ADUs from being built, like having extra rules about timing, then it concerns me, then there might be situations where we would not get an ADU built. So there are two issues. One is, do we let this applicant have a variance because they didn't know the rule? And or do we want to change the rule, which I don't know that we can do that in this body, but those are my two thoughts. And as to the first, I would be inclined to grant the variance.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Through the chair, if I could redirect to staff on what Mr. Blythe related as, is that pretty much what you recall of the original application? That the issue of what happens next is not, it's not raised at that time, which would be understandable, you know, until something bumps up against the problem, we don't know what's there.
It's possible. This would have been a couple of years ago. I can't recall the specific conversation. I know nowadays we do try to make it a point to tell applicants that are considering an ADU and other work on their house, that if you know, they do build the ADU and they do exceed building coverage and floor area, that they can't do another work to the main residence. So it is pretty standard practice. State law and the ordinance would have been relatively new at the time. So potentially it wasn't one of those top priorities. But again, I can't recall the specific conversation.
How about what you had for lunch that day?
Wish I knew.
All right, no, I appreciate the response, thank you.
I have one more.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Or comment, I guess. The other thing that concerns me is that we're penalizing people for not having enough money to do more of the part that they wanted to do at the same time. So I also would like to know if the applicant had put in plans for both pieces, the ADU that's attached as well as the covered patio. But then they only built the ADU and waited till they had enough funding to build the patio. That would have been allowed. I can't recall how much time you have once something's approved to build.
Yeah. That's a little bit tricky and would probably go into more of our building division's operations. Once you submit a building permit, they expire after a while if you haven't done any work on it. So I assume, and this is just hypothesizing based on my knowledge of the building division and how we would do something like this. If two permits were submitted at the same time, one permit was actively constructed and completed and received final, and the other building permit expired, I think we would probably make somebody reapply for the building permit and be in the same position. Thank you.
That's all with the, so building on the question Commissioner Schindler before and Vice Chair Harris, I'll say that in general, I agree with Vice Chair Harris's comment that we are trying to encourage ADUs and we want to have more housing of all kinds in our city. So that's my sentiment. And I agree that it seems that in this instance of the way this would be applied, that would be potentially a detriment to ADUs in certain circumstances. So that's just more how I would think about it in general. So I can see it from that direction. What are we solving for? I mean, I'm asking you to interpret state law. What I heard you say essentially is the state law said this, and then you tried to write it as close as possible to the state law as possible. But where is the moral hazard or the jeopardy, given that you still, no matter what order you're working on this, could never build a house bigger than was originally allowable? That the maximum it can go over is the 800 square feet. So I'm a little lost trying to figure out what we're trying to prevent ultimately with this sequencing piece, which would stop that further development on this site. Now, partially that may be unanswerable by you, which is fine, but I'm just interested if you have any input into that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Generally, the state law was intended to give allowances to ADUs. So we wrote the ordinance to give the allowances to the ADUs and not, the main residents. That may be the best answer I can give at the moment.
Let me just finish the thought real quick, which is, so I struggle with this because in general, I'm inclined to grant the variance, but I also don't want to be inconsistent in how we're applying this. And we've got a set practice now of informing everybody, which I believe you said, so that they're aware coming in about this issue about sequencing. And as I said at the beginning, we are not the policy making body here, we're the policy implementing body. So I'll just say that part seems a bit sticky to me. I think there's a part of me that where I wish that, you all work it through with council and get this cleaned up, that will allow the sequencing thing to work, because I don't quite see it. I don't see the detriment in the other direction. So that's just talking out loud for a second. Commissioner Schindler, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to build on Chair DeCarty's question and just again seek for clarification on that moral hazard or that situation we're trying to avoid. If we're trying to encourage not only the development of ADUs, but also that the ADUs are a high quality and livable space, I think that may be where the 800 number comes in, right? We're trying to avoid a situation where an ADU gets constructed. Actually, make sure I ask this as a question. Are we trying to avoid the situation where an ADU is built at 150 square feet? The allowances that the lot may add 800 square feet, and that then 650 gets added back to the main house. It's permissible by the math, but that would seem not aligned with the spirit of the ordinance. Is that an example of a situation we're trying to steer clear of?
I would say so. That's just something we wouldn't allow. You don't just get an extra 800 square feet to spend on your house as you wish. It has to be for the ADU. So somebody couldn't build a 200 square foot ADU and then 600 square feet into their house. But yeah, essentially we're trying to create housing that's livable. It's a state mandate, state priority, city priority.
Okay, so that would not be permitted, even though, and perhaps it's just my reading of this ordinance, that would be mathematically permissible.
Can I try?
Yeah.
You could build a bigger ADU.
Yeah.
But you couldn't put it over into the house. The other issue is what you end up using the ADU for.
Mhm.
That's actually nothing that we can be in charge of, but what you can have is an ADU that might be utilized by the current owner for their own use,
Right.
but it is still a separate livable space, so that in the future, it could be utilized as separate housing. I'm trying to summarize, I think, several conversations we've had in this body along those lines historically, but sort of looking around to see if I've done it in that way, but that's a little bit about. So there's a little bit of a hazard the other direction, potentially.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Commissioner Barnes?
When we took public comment, there wasn't
did.
any.
That's right. So we're now
Discussion.
in deliberation and moving toward a motion.
So I will say that I am neutral on the development of ADUs. That's not my purview, nor is setting policy for that. So I look at this particular case and I generally don't tend to be favorable to variances, but what I find persuasive about the argument this evening is that when you add back in the porches, you really get to a 2,800 square foot number for this particular project. So I don't see the intent of the applicant to be egregious in maxing out square footage on this particular parcel. And I see it entirely reasonable from my standpoint, to grant a variance because it passes the smell test for inadvertent or, there wasn't, in my opinion, as I can divine, like foresight or a pre-notion that this was gonna be a strategy to max out square footage on the parcel and get above and beyond. Because, when you add back in the additional porch area, you get to 2,800. And I know that staff, as a matter of course, as it should, needs to come down on the side of not granting the variance because that's what they do, and their job is to interpret the ordinances as they're written. So I would be more concerned if they were being subjective in their staff report, but they're not. They're being objective based on what the regulations say. So with that, my purview is to look at that and say, is there merit to this variance? And in my opinion, there is merit to this variance. So for that reason, I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Can I ask one more clarifying question, Mr. Turner? Take the ADU out. We have a house, it's not maximized its lot coverage. Is there anything preventing this applicant from maximizing, coming back and asking to maximize the lot coverage in the house? Project and all of that?
Not from a compliance standpoint, it would be probably use permit revision. Just because it won't be use permit process initially,
Right,
or amendment, depending on the scale of the revisions.
all right. That's helpful. All right, any other questions, comments, or I'd be looking for a motion in this mix? Vice Chair Harris.
I would like to make a motion to grant the variance for the covered patio.
So the motion would be to adopt a resolution approving a variance to exceed the maximum building coverage and approving a use permit revision for exterior modifications to a previously approved use permit for a new two-story residence on a substandard lot. Essentially taking the recommendation and putting approve in the two places where deny is.
I
If
see
it were so
Karina. Through the
Yeah,
chair.
of course, Ms. Sandmeyer.
Yeah, yeah, through the chair, I just want to clarify, so there's findings that need to be made for the variance. So if there is a motion to approve the variance, staff would appreciate direction on how those findings can be made, and then we'll need to, my recommendation would be to continue the item to December 5th, so we can craft a resolution of approval. Right now, we have the resolution is for denial because staff did not believe we could make the findings, but if we have direction from the commission on findings of approval, we can put together a new resolution and a new staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Sandmeyer. You would be directing us to attachment A, and we would be needing to put something in the whereases or something in the now therefores.
Well, let's see. I'm actually looking at the staff report. This might be the easiest way to do it. So the staff report pages 2, 3, and 4 list the 5 findings that have to be made. So I think it would probably be easiest for a motion to include direction on each finding, if there's a motion for approval.
All right,
Or I'm sorry, I apologize. If there's direction for staff, I think that the best way to move forward would be for direction for staff to bring back a resolution of approval, if that's where the vote, if that's what the commission chooses. So it would be a vote for continuance with direction for staff to update the resolution.
all right. So there are 5 elements in here. Does the commission, in this case, Vice Chair Harris, who is making a motion to approve rather than deny, need to touch on all 5 or on just one or on aspects of them?
So all 5 findings need to be made in the affirmative, so we would need findings for all 5.
All right.
I think only
Although-
3 of them have information that are findings of denial, so I think if you can focus on those 3. that'd be-
Okay.
I think it's 1, 2, and 4.
All right. While Vice Chair is considering that, I'd like to ask a question of the applicant, which is if we continue this until December, which is a month from now, is that a hardship to you in any way?
Well, let's see, when did we submit for this, Chris? Back in June?
June, July.
Yeah, so it's just putting it off, but if I understand the process properly. It would be just a formality consent item at the next meeting, so I could start. With the building department now and get the permit process rolling, the building permit process rolling.
The only guidance I could give you on that is you'll hear what ends up happening,
Mhm.
but until that December meeting, when it is actually approved. You know, for lack of a better way of saying it, anything could happen.
I get that.
There's no way that we or staff could give you any direction to make an assumption of approval. Ultimately in that.
We're this far in, we'll just roll with whatever you guys go with.
All right, well, let's see where we get on this. So Vice Chair Harris making the motion, if you have any ideas, anybody considering voting with Vice Chair Harris might also jump in with suggestions about such findings. Commissioner Riggs?
Sure, I'm happy either way. It looks to me that the most challenging item is the first finding. And so, if I may suggest that rather than the hardship being created by an act of the owner, the hardship appears to be created by a misunderstanding of process. It was not solely on the owner's part. I don't know whether that's enough to fly for staff. Mr. Burns.
Through the chair, may I add?
Yeah, please.
So the first part of it says that a hardship peculiar to the property. This is a substandard lot. It's 7,000 square feet. So it is subject to a use permit. So by definition, there are requirements for a use permit that other lots, even greater than 7,000 square feet, don't have to go through the use permit, particular use permit revision process. So I think it would apply to that. I think you could-
That's been taken off the table in the past, though, since 50% of Menlo Park properties are substandard or were substandard until a few years ago. But I did skip over that part. And I think the approach here is that the building was built And therefore, the existence of the current situation on the property is that the building was built under one understanding. And therefore, the existing structure is peculiar to this misunderstanding. Corinna, is that something that is within the bounds of the argument?
Yeah, I think we can use that information to work on a finding. I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
I have a question which is back on the economic hardship piece. That seems like a reasonable point to raise. I think Vice Chair Harris may have raised it. And I wonder if that's in the hardship here, which is if we are in this concurrence, it puts pressure on an owner that they may not be able to meet given their financial circumstances, were they able to then sequence. To me, that seems that that's a hardship that is, if it's not carried with the property, it's associated with the property because it's the owner of the property and their ability to be able to do that work concurrently. So I'm curious if that actually as a hardship is one that is potentially allowed to be considered, Ms. Sandmeyer.
Well, so I think that the phrasing here is that financial hardship is not something that the variance can be, that the finding can be based on. I think it's, I think maybe what Commissioner Riggs was saying more, it has more to do with the misunderstanding and potentially this was one of the earlier cases. So it's, if that's what the commission is kind of thinking, that maybe it's something that wouldn't happen today as staff has more experience with communicating the ordinance.
So this,
But I
is- I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Sandmeyer.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I don't, want to put words in anyone's mouth, but if that was kind of the intent, then we could go forward with something like that.
You would be pointing then to the third item in number 1, saying that section 1679050B4 is clear on the timing of such floor area and building convergence exceedance. And that clarity exists now, but it may not have been clear at the time, given that it was new and both not familiar to applicants or to their advisors in the community, such as architects and like, nor perhaps fully clear in staff as they are offering guidance. And the notion here is to be able to put that because it puts us temporally in creating this exception as opposed to something that would then be a precedent for anybody coming after. Is that a way to try to build on your point?
Yeah, I think we can use that feedback to work on a finding. Thank you.
Chair Harris.
Ms. Sandmeyer, you said that an economic hardship would not be permissible. And if you could go into a little bit more detail as to why we could not make that finding.
So that just has to do with the way the finding is worded. It has to be something peculiar to the property. And it says in that context, personal, family, financial difficulties are not hardships justifying a variance. And I believe that comes from state law and kind of prescribes when variances can be approved or under what type of findings variances can be approved.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so where we are now is Vice Chair says a first for approval. We have a recommendation that this would be continued with guidance that would come back to us, rewritten for approval. We've suggested, I mean, the general, I'm not saying commissioners are agreeing to this because we haven't voted on anything. But there's a suggestion about how that language would be rewritten. So I guess to Vice Chair Harris, if it's generally written along these lines, does that work for you and your intent in your making this motion? And if so, then we would be looking for a second.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Riggs?
Yes, if I may ask staff, do you need a suggestion for findings for number 2 and number 4?
That would be helpful, yes.
I think I can offer that if the chair will indulge, of course. Number 2 is that such variance is necessary for preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other conforming property. And so in this case, in other conditions, you'd be able to build a covered patio. And that is, I think, a significant part of Menlo Park life. So I think that is an element that meets that request. And then item 4, that the conditions are not generally associated with other properties in the same zoning classification. The issue here is not the zoning classification. It's the misunderstanding up front, which I would have to guess probably only happened once that year. And Ms. Sandmeyer, do those sound arguable?
Yeah, I believe we understand enough of the intention for the motion to update the findings and bring a resolution, a draft resolution of approval at the December 5th meeting.
Skills at writing are trusted and appreciated. Thank you.
So at this point, Ms. Sandmeyer, are we voting to continue this item with direction till the December X meeting? Or do you need a vote in principle of approval for this motion so that it can be considered and continued to December?
I know my recommendation would be to vote to continue the item with the direction that was provided to staff.
All right.
And then that would be no.
All right, I'm going to ask Vice Chair Harris then to table her original motion and would entertain a motion along the lines as described by Ms. Sandmeyer, if not to force anybody to do anything. Commissioner Barnes,
I make a motion to continue
with
to a date certain.
to it saying with guidance as given to staff.
Correct. For a date certain, I'm sorry, that was December 5th, right? So date certain, December 5th, pursuant to the direction given to staff this evening, and as collected by staff.
All right, that's a motion made by Commissioner Barnes. Do we have a second? Commissioner Doe?
Second that motion.
All right, a second. Do we have any further discussion? So on the table is voting to continue this item with direction until December 5th. That would be a vote in the affirmative. A vote against would be wanting to continue the discussion and entertain a different motion this evening. So with that, in alphabetical order, Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Schindler.
Yes.
Commissioner Tate is still not with us. I will also vote yes. The item's continued until December. Thank you to the applicant for your patience with us on this in the next month. And before we close, through the applicant, I'll recognize Mr. Cap.
Thank you. You could take note of this, but is it possible to get a straw poll on the motion itself to get a sense of whether we can move forward with this or not?
That's not what the guidance was, and that's so no.
Okay.
Would be as chair on this. So I think you'll take your sentiment from the discussion and how you've heard from various people in this. But unfortunately, I think that's the best direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
And let me, as long as I just said that somewhat arbitrarily, Ms. Sandmeyer, is that appropriate direction?
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
So we'll go ahead and do that. With that, we'll close item F1 again with thanks for your patience with us until December.
See you in December.
See you in December.
Everybody have Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank
And we'll move
Creativity.
item F2, what we do. Item F2 is to consider and adopt a resolution to approve a use permit to demolish an existing one-story residence and construct a new two-story residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width and area at 316 Grayson Court. This is in the R1U, single-family urban residential zoning district. And now I believe Ms. Khan is who I'm turning to. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public in attendance today. For this item, there are no updates to the staff report. The applicant and the property owners are here in attendance virtually to answer any questions that the commissioners may have tonight. I believe there's also a short presentation by the applicants in regards to this project. With that, I hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Before turning to the applicant for their presentation, any clarifying questions for staff? All right, with that, we will turn to the applicant and welcome.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Anna Felver with Thomas James Homes. I'll be presenting a short presentation on behalf of the homeowners for 316 Grayson Court. If you want to move to the next slide. The reason this is before you tonight is this is a 6,500 square foot lot, which is substandard, as a lot standard, as mentioned before, is 7,000 square feet. The lot is also 50 feet wide, and the minimum is requirement is 65 feet. So we're substandard in width and area. As you can see, we move forward a little bit, but we're off of paralleling Chester Street. We've got Laurel Avenue perpendicular, as well as Arnold perpendicular. So the area is familiar with some of our other projects, but first project that we're presenting off of Grayson Court. And the court is on the left end of the screen, which is the west side of Grayson Court. And you can move to the next slide. This is just showing the aerial view of Grayson and that lot area that we have. There is an existing home on site, 1426 square feet, and it has a detached garage and a detached shed currently on site. And we can move to the next slide. Just to show a little bit of the neighborhood that's along Grayson. There are a lot of single-story ranch bungalow type homes, and they're evolving. The one in the center you can see was currently or more recently approved. It's got a transitional style with it, some cedar siding. One of these homes is off of Laurel, so showing the different materials that are around this neighborhood. We have board and bat, we have cedar, stucco, horizontal siding, brick, just a lot of variety in the immediate neighborhood. Lots of gables, as you can see, some shed roofs as well. If you go to the next slide, I want to show you some 2 stories in the neighborhood off of Arnold. On the corner of Arnold and Grayson is the top left image, a stucco farmhouse style. You've got transitional in the center there of Arnold. You've got one of our other projects, transitional style on the right there. And then below, one of our modern projects, modern homes off of Laurel. And then in the center is actually off of O'Keefe, just showing a modern farmhouse style with the board and bat being used in the larger neighborhood. And then closer on Laurel Street is a craftsman style home at that bottom right corner. So trying to come up with a style that would speak both to the nostalgic ranch bungalow and then to the larger neighborhood as well, as it's evolving into 2-story homes. So if you go to the next slide, these are the 2 renderings of the proposed 2-story home. It's that farmhouse style. You can see that wide, long porch at the front, trying to speak back to that ranch style that would be seen in wide ranch style homes. You've got the trellis above the garage. You've got the gables, a little bit of gable treatment on the left-hand side with that stained wood, the board and batten that's being used and can be found in the neighborhood. A 2nd story steps back. It also steps inward and is centralized from the left and right hand sides. The colors being used are that off-white with some dark accents at the doors to match the dark window frames. And of course, you're seeing the stained wood as well to bring some warmth to the elevation. You go to the next slide. Just want to show you the existing site versus what we're proposing. on the left image is the existing footprint. And we're staying pretty close in width and depth to that existing footprint. And then you can see that left adjacent property. It steps in at the rear, and the house on our site does that as well. If you look at the image on the right, we're following that type of footprint. So we're not trying to go past the left adjacent home too far, trying to stay within that depth, and we're stepping back or stepping in, if you will, towards the center to kind of create that same footprint. To the right, a little bit of different footprint. It's stepping several times and creating this relief at the left edge. We're also stepping back several times and creating a relief at that same edge, trying to mimic that footprint as well. So there's a little bit of a dance going on and trying to make sure we're in alignment with the homes adjacent to the property. You can see there's, oh, that works too. No worries. There's a garage on the right-hand side. It's a single car garage. There's a mix of single cars, 2-car garages in the neighborhood. So we're providing a single car garage and then 2 off-street parking spaces. And then also in the back of our footprint, you'll see that there's a covered porch included in this proposal. And that's about 37 feet off the rear property line. Our minimum is 20 feet. So we're providing enough rear yard to be utilized by the homeowners. And then our main building footprint is actually, I believe, 45, a little bit over 45 away from the rear property line. So more than enough rear yard setback there. And of course, the second story is just as far, if not farther, from that rear property line. And then you can go to the next slide. A little bit about trees on site. There's X's off on the left. That's the showing the trees proposed to be removed. These are non-protected trees. There are 8 non-protected trees on site, and we're removing them. There's 2 in the front, and on the right image, you can see them highlighted in green. Those 2 in the front are being protected. And then in the back right corner, there's a little bit of canopy coming over from another property. We're protecting that tree as well. And then the right image there, you can see it's kind of small, but it's a 36-inch box new tree that's proposed for the rear property. And then you can see the edging along the right edge, the rear edge. We're showing some privacy hedges there. And the next slide. These are the floor plans. We can go through them real quick. Garage on the right. There's an ADU being proposed on the left. If you're curious, the homeowners do want to rent this house, this part out to help with payment of this development. So just so you know the use on that. And then in the back is the great room, dining room, kitchen that opens up onto that outdoor living space. Up above on the second floor, which is the left image, you'll see the primary suite on the right above the garage, a loft that's centralized with a little deck that's coming off that lot. And then to the left is the 2-bedroom wing with the shared bath and laundry. Next slide. These are just the elevations I want to show you that we're 27 feet at the max ridge, maximum height of 28 feet. So we're below that. We also are a couple feet off the average natural grade. So trying to make sure that we're within the daylight plane, within the maximum ridge, or the maximum height. We are proposing a 9-foot first story and an 8-foot second story to make sure that we're within those means and the requirements. And then, of course, by setting back the home and centralizing it on the second floor, we can pull in from that daylight plane and not intrude more than allowed. And then you can see the rear, the massing does get smaller at the rear. You can see on the left-hand side, that's actually much further back from the rear. And then using that deck, again, that patios using the same posts and brick bases as the front to create some integrating the same materials and language. Next slide. The left is elevations on the top, right's on the bottom, showing that we're stepping back that second story from the first story. And then, of course, you can see on the bottom right image, you can see the deck that's integrated into that single story roof line. So just wanted to point that out and showing the wall that's there, and it's open in the back, but enclosed on the sides to create more screening. Next slide. And then showing our process there, a little bit of back and forth with planning staff, making sure that we're meeting code, making sure that we're providing the right massing. the previous renderings on the left and where we are now is on the right, and showing how we're relating more and speaking more to that ranch style on the right. And then also creating smaller massings on the right as well. And then pulling that warmth from just the right side, we've now integrated it throughout the front of the elevation. And next slide. That's the side. You can see the left elevation was previous, that 2-story massing. It has now been changed and updated to what you see on the right, which is set back from that 1st story, and just adding more articulation to it. And we have done neighbor outreach, sent notices back in March and held a virtual meeting in April. The homeowners are in great communication with their neighbors, and they received, which we forwarded on, 9 support letters from the adjacent neighbors, including the left and the right, and the neighbors along the street. They've signed that, and we've sent it over to the planning staff to show that these neighbors are really in support of this project, which is really great to see neighbors participate in this project and be supportive of the homeowners. And that's all that I have. Thank you for your time tonight. And we have our team here to answer any questions. And we also have our architect with Bassini and Lagoni on the call. And we have our homeowners that would like to quickly introduce themselves, if that's okay.
By all means.
Thank you. John and Katie.
Go ahead.
Okay, we might not have the video, but oh, here we go. Hi, everyone. We're Katie and John Cromie, the owners at Grayson Court. Thanks for having us here tonight. We bought our property back in 2009 and lived there happily for 12 years as we grew our family, and we talked about needing to expand at some point. And then about 1.5 years ago, we actually had a house fire. And so that kind of forced our hand and expedited this process. So we've actually been living in a rental for the last 1.5 years as we've been getting these plans together and these designs together. And we're just really excited to be back on our street. We're super excited about these plans. Really miss our street, really miss our neighborhood, our neighbors. Very just grateful to have their support. I think they're all tired of looking at the eyesore that is our neglected, burned house. So we're all excited to see this make some progress. So
yeah, absolutely. I think as you look through the design, we've really poured our heart and soul into it over the last year. We poured our heart and soul into the original house with DIY projects and just making that a part of the community. And now we had a chance to essentially start with a clean slate. And that was kind of necessary because of the floodplain requirements and just how that project was going to go. And so I think, almost every piece of this house, as we've presented to you, really it captures some piece of our value set of community building and just trying to create an environment where people can join us. So yeah, thanks so much.
thank you.
All right, thank you. And sorry about the fire and your loss. That sounds awful. So Ms. Felber, thank you. To the property owners, thank you. Before we go to public comment, any clarifying questions for anybody on the applicant's team? All right, seeing none, we'll then move to public comment. Mr. Turner.
Alrighty. If you would like to give public comment on this item, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you're calling into this evening's meeting, click *9 on your phone. If you're in person, please fill out a comment card and we will call you up to the table. At the moment, we don't see any hands.
Wait a second. Still none?
Still no hands.
All right, we will go ahead and close public comment on item F2, and we will bring it back to the Planning Commission for questions, discussion, and ultimately a motion. Who would like to begin? Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I guess full disclosure, the applicant, gentleman John had called me, I don't know, 3 years ago when it's, or a year and a half ago when he had a fire, just to talk about fire and potential path through planning commission. So I had a discussion back then. And then I had a beer with him in Halloween because he was at a buddy's house, but that was not going to impact my review of this project. So.
That's much
as I-
appreciated.
Yes. As I look at this project, it's a very approvable project, and I think the articulation, excuse me, on the second floor is well done. The step backs are well done. Clearly, the design is compatible not only with Menlo Park and certainly with this area as well. I like the single-story garage, not that it would be a basis for approval or disapproval, excuse me, for the single car garage. So you have a nice visual across the front. So I think the architectural elements, both from an articulation standpoint, from a material standpoint, from a setback standpoint, design standpoint, all work. This project it meets all the requirements, setbacks, lot coverage, floor area, daylight plane, parking and height. So it's all within development standards. Clearly, they've done outreach to the neighbors. So for that reason, not only is it perfectly, I think, approvable, but I'll make a motion. I'll put a motion on the floor to approve the project as submitted in the staff report.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the project as submitted by Commissioner Barnes. We can have a second. We can also have discussion. So it does not preclude further questions or discussion. Commissioner Riggs.
No, thank you. I have a question, it could be either for Ms. Felber or for Ms. Khan, regarding the privacy aspects of the second story windows. It looks as if the proposed site plan has no room for any kind of screening trees at the property line. Are there existing screening trees at the right side property line? Or are those shrubs that are indicated on the site plan?
I believe Ms. Felver, through the chair, if I may, I believe Ms. Felver did say that they were proposing some privacy hedges.
A two-story hedge?
No, the hedges would be at 7 feet, so they wouldn't fully go up to the second story. I do see the limitations in providing for any sort of new landscaping within the setback area.
And so I guess I can ask you as the city's project lead, what did you resolve for the privacy issues from the second floor windows? Was it, it doesn't appear to have been sill heights, so was it obscure glass or what was your solution?
So obscure glass would be a solution should the commissioners feel like that would help with the privacy. It's not something that has been called out on the elevations. Given that the applicants have done so has the property owners have done a wonderful job with the outreach. There were some neighbors that came and have voiced their concerns, and none of them being privacy.
I appreciate that. I'm also aware, including from public hearings, that people cannot always conceive what a second story window might be. As we end up more and more familiar with architectural orientations and situations, and easily forget that most of us are not so trained or habitualized. So again, I think the concern here is as evident as anywhere. Particularly the side yards that aren't even wide enough to insert screening trees. And trees are not something 7 feet high. And, that's I do see that of course, TJ Holmes knows all about exit windows and has provided access to all 3 bedrooms at the front and the rear. So the window sills could be higher on the side windows. And that may be preferable to obscure glass. I would certainly want to hear a proposal from the applicant, how they would like to approach it, since it appears it hasn't really been resolved up till now,
So a question of the applicant.
if you please.
Ms. Felber?
So the question being, what would we recommend for privacy? Is that correct?
Please.
I know that we were in contact with the neighbors and there was that discussion, because as you know, these windowsills are lower than we typically propose on the side elevations. We did raise a few to make sure that they were above 5 feet. But there are some that are lower, that seemed fine with the neighbors, and that's why we didn't raise the windowsill, as that conversation had been had with the neighbors. The hedging is not in front of the loft windows, or they're in front of the loft windows. In particular, loft windows are moved off the property line over 15 feet. So those windows we weren't really too concerned about, as they were further than the smaller setbacks. But if we need to raise certain windows to appease the commission, then that's something that we'd be considering looking at. I would love to talk to the homeowners to make sure if that's the route that they want to go, or if obscuring the windows is the route they want to go. But again, we did talk to the neighbors and they didn't seem to have an issue with those windows in the plans.
Yeah, as I said, I have found sometimes the hard way that it's not always appropriate to assume that those not involved in the project, sometimes even those who are involved in the project, fully understand architectural orientations. And we've seen enough over the years, not just planning commission, but other issues at council where people come forward most upset saying, I had no idea. And in the case of, an architectural orientation, it's rather understandable that they had no idea. So that actually is my only concern, although I can't resist saying that you did show a previous front elevation that was a rather nice composition, and I'm sorry that didn't move forward. But with that one concern, I would like to second the motion to approve if the maker would accept the direction that the windows, excluding the ones that are set back on the back right side, would either have a raised sill, and I'm going to say not necessarily 5 feet, but say at least 50 inches, or the obscure glass in the up to say 60 inches. And I think that's similar to what we have addressed before, where we've had a tight lot like this.
So that's a
Through the chair.
conditional second. So
Yes.
back to the maker, Commissioner Barnes.
So I appreciate Commissioner Riggs's attention to that. I'd like to get specific as I look at the elevations about which windows.
So it would be all the second floor windows, except on the lower elevation, those right two large ones, which when I look at the site plan, they're set back an extra, I think maybe even 10 feet. Through the chair, Ms. Felber, is that right? There's something like an additional 10-foot setback.
Yes, that's correct.
My iPad is a little bit dark at the moment.
I was about to pull up the exact dimension. Give me one moment. 15 feet, 4.5 inches from the property line to that setback of where the large windows are.
Right, so in front of that in front of that on the, I don't know who am I speaking to?
I think you're working with Commissioner Riggs to decide if you agree with his suggested condition.
Thank you. Through the chair, would it be okay to bring that up on the screen? So we can make sure.
We're looking at A31.
Correct, A31, page D7, sheet A31. Wake up.
So that would actually be, as Ms. Felber referenced, the loft windows that are well set back, and I wouldn't want to include those in this request.
You would pull that.
Hang on just a second, Commissioner Riggs. We're gonna see if we can put this on the screen or not. Go ahead, Mr. Turner, do whatever you need to do to talk to somebody. If you need to.
Sorry, I was just, there it is.
All right,
There it is.
Our local area network is suffering from 8 laptops and an iPad all trying to access.
That is permissible.
yes,
If I
please,
stand.
Mr. Burns, yes, do whatever.
Whatever means of understanding. Okay, so, I'll start from my informal nature. So these are the ones that are set back 15 feet. So we're not talking about these. These are the ones that are over the garage. Correct? Are these subject to discussion?
Yes,
So these are, okay. And then these right here, are these subject to discussion as well, or is it just?
those 3, yes.
These 3 right there. And the recommendation is, these are at a 3-foot sill height and you, 36 inches in your proposal to go to.
I think it was 50 inches. To be honest, it's a compromise because true privacy might be 60 inches, but I just hesitate to be, from this forum.
Okay.
And that's for a sill height. And then the alternative would be obscure glass, which, as we discussed before, doesn't necessarily mean frosted glass. There are many textured glass out there. They simply distort the light and lend privacy.
So, in the absence of a neighbor issue, it's a tough one. In that I don't want to over legislate for something that isn't called out as being an issue, but yet we also want to make sure we're thinking ahead. I have a tough time with the blanket raising of all the sill heights, for instance, to 50 inches, because I think that's over prescriptive and I don't have a clear sense of what's on either side of this. For instance, look, this directly looks over on either the right or the left. Is there a way that we can get an understanding of that?
Yeah, I'll second that. I had wished this morning that I could get over there and actually look at the neighboring windows. Or, conversely, that either the applicant or staff had done that.
So I'm hesitant to blanket, if there were usually in these situations, there's specificity in terms of a light well. Okay, you've got a light well that looks over this, or you've got this, which looks over, Jimmy or Johnny's bedroom. In the absence of that specificity of what exactly the impact of these windows are for the line of sights from those windows, it's a hard one to have a blanket across all of them. We should be more specific on the specific windows that might be problematic.
And noting that was one of 2 alternatives. The other was the obscure
obscure.
glass. And leaving this as designed. Would Commissioner Barnes be more comfortable asking staff to make an on-site determination of what were the most affected adjacent windows? It would be awkward, certainly, if we found out that the property on the right simply had no windows on that
All
side.
right, there's a garret. Uh, So. Let me say that I'm reticent to accept it as a blanket condition, and I don't have enough information to pick each one, so. And without a prescriptive definition of what is a privacy issue or not, I would have a hard time, I think, putting staff in that position to make that subjective determination.
If it helps any, Ms. Sandemeyer probably has the most history, although Mr. Turner's been around a while too. This is far from the first request of this exact issue.
Could I ask the two commissioners maybe to hang on to this conversation and see if there are other commissioners that have any comments or suggestions or ideas that might give either or both of you a sense of where other commissioners are, or they might raise something that might be helpful to the conversation. I don't want to
Sure.
prematurely cut it off.
No,
but
great idea.
Might suggest that.
Thank you.
So other commissioners with either clarifying questions or comments, and again, at the moment, we have a first from Commissioner Barnes and in the process, potentially a second from Commissioner Riggs with agreement on this condition, which is still being worked out. Vice Chair Harris.
I would agree with Commissioner Barnes that given that we don't have enough information, I don't feel comfortable being prescriptive on all 6 of those windows, and so I would be inclined to vote for the motion as it stands.
Vice Chair Harris.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? I will also say that in principle, the only thing and the only reason we're seeing this project is because it's on a substandard lot. If it were a standard lot, it would have been approved as submitted by staff. So I also get concerned about consistency. In this instance, I would be therefore inclined at the margins to approve this as submitted by staff. But I appreciate the conversation and certainly I'm willing to learn or hear more. But that's where I will be at the moment. Any questions or comments from commissioners or Commissioner Riggs?
The non-conformance was width, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons for the width is that we talk about trying to have some setback, which is generally for privacy. And that was even with the assumption 60 years ago that buildings would be virtually all single-story ranch.
I appreciate that, but it does have the appropriate setbacks. It meets the setbacks standards for lots of whatever width. Correct.
Yes, except that wider lots don't as often go to within 6.5 feet of the property line. They take advantage of that added width to set back a little bit. In fact, most typically one side had a driveway. And if you lay those out appropriately, then everyone has, 17.5 feet or whatever separation between buildings. So, I mean, I am conscious of this. I've had the pleasure of living in quite a variety of
Fair enough.
what was the
Make your point again.
what was the name
of
of the dog that if you said it over the telephone, it would set him off? It was a movie. So, yeah, I'm cognizant of this concern and my own neighbors who have come to me and said, how is it possible that that second story was built? It looks right down on my yard. And I'm sorry to share this, but a neighbor 3 doors down or 2 doors down said, my wife and I nude sunbathe all the time. So there's a variety of reasons and assumptions living in some single family area, and certainly when you have 3 out of 4 homes as being second story, it's the status quo, and that's how you live, and you adjust to that. But when they occur in a tapestry of single-story homes, the first, second story is a bold item. And we don't, for example, we don't have a particularly aggressive daylight plan. So our second stories are quite near property lines. Some other towns, it's lower. So anyway, at the risk of saying too much, it's a concern that I have seen since the days of Melody Pagey on the planning commission, and it was sort of our pattern to address privacy. Some neighbors were aware and immediately spoke to it, and have spoken to this commission in the last year, I believe. And, you know, some were simply unaware, of course, until it was built. And so I think your reference to consistency works for me as well, except the other way, where I try to make sure that there is a voice for this privacy issue, whether or not it's on the table for those who are adjacent or not.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Other questions or comments from commissioners? Otherwise, at the moment, we have a first on the table from Commissioner Barnes for approval as submitted.
May I, through the chair? I would be curious to hear directly back from the applicant as to, of these windows, in their opinion, are these problematic?
Problematic if they were to be adjusted in some way, is that your question?
If they weren't to be adjusted.
I'll say that again, I'm sorry.
I would like to hear from the applicant, even though we're looking at plans that are submitted and ostensibly they are plans that they're comfortable with. Want to recheck with the applicant as to any of these windows that they foresee as being problematic or would be easy to adjust given how close or the line of sight to the neighbor, and it a reasonable request for them to entertain.
Yeah, absolutely. So was that clear, Ms. Felber, to the applicant, your assessment of the 6 windows in question?
Yeah, I just wanted to also point out, this is the 8-foot plate height. So your windows are starting at 7 feet. Typically, they would be starting at 8 feet. So having a raised windowsill to 60 inches would be difficult for some of these. They just would have to be fixed or not really as operable for ventilation as would be preferred and ideal in a 9-foot ceiling situation. But I would say that the rooms that need the light, having that second wall of light is really helpful to balance out the light in the rooms. I would say the bathrooms I'd be concerned about ventilation, but those would be a place that would be easier to raise the sill on, and those are more center in the plan. And so that would be more over the homes that are adjacent, as long as we can make them operable.
Thank you, Ms. Felber. Mr. Barnes, you asked a question. Any follow-up question or?
I do, but I'm curious to hear Commissioner Riggs.
Commissioner Riggs?
Well, Ms. Felber spoke to raising the sills, but an obscure window, particularly in a bathroom, is a more natural approach. And again, I'm sure Ms. Felber is familiar with different textured and patterned glasses. There's quite a variety, in fact. Some are used quite intentionally. And in the early 50s, they were quite common. For example, as side lights at entry doors. It allowed a great deal of, actually back to at least the 40s. Allowing extra light, and you can see color through a textured window, unlike, a frosted window. But just a slight measure of privacy, which is really all that's needed. Almost any amount of distortion in the glass serves the purpose. Actually, I was at a glass shop this morning, and I think there was something like 17 different pattern glasses sitting there on the countertop.
That's it.
Man.
Mr. Barnes, yes.
So as a way forward, as I'm looking at the second floor plan, I see 2 bathrooms with the opportunity to have obscure glass put in. Am I actually 3? Am I seeing that correctly? I see 2 on the would be the left elevation and 1 on the right elevation.
Mhm.
Do I see that correctly?
That's a question to the applicant, sorry, to the chair.
Yep.
And if so, as a follow-on question, those would be logical opportunities for obscure glass, and would that be amenable to the applicant?
So that's.
I'm- yeah. Thank you. I'm checking in with our homeowners. It's something that we want to make sure since they own the home that we're getting feedback from them.
For other commissioners, are you looking at A21? What are you looking at?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
That's my reference point.
I do want to answer that bathrooms are the preferred and windows to be raised and or to be obscured.
So I would say for the purposes of I think for architectural reasons, I would be more inclined to go for obscure than raising the sill heights. I think there is a regularity and cadence to the size of the windows. So my motion would include obscure glass on the bathroom windows, and that would be the treatment of the windows as offered, as suggested by Commissioner Riggs.
So to play this back, Commissioner Riggs was interested in either raising the sill heights of 6 windows or obscure glass. Sill height raised to 50, obscure glass to 60. You're saying that of the 6, the 3 that are the bathroom, to do obscure glass in the lower pane, is that the
No, it's top to bottom.
whole thing obscure?
Yep. And it is, and that would be part of the first. Unless, of course, Commissioner Riggs, might get through the chair. Do you have any reason to believe that obscure top to bottom is a?
Oh,
Good idea.
yes, yeah, and that's fine, and I need to check the elevations, but if these are casement windows, they're going to be top to bottom one piece anyway. Yeah, they look to be casement windows, so they would be single light. And just to clarify to the chair, it was never up to 60 inches, it was up to 50 inches if it's a sill height response, or leaving the sills where they are and using obscure glass.
That was my
Frankly.
attempt to summarize. If I did that inaccurately, I apologize.
Yeah, frankly, it could be floor to ceiling glass if it's obscure.
So I'm revising my first to be that, and I'll look for a second, and should it be Commissioner Riggs, I'd certainly be happy to have that.
I'd be happy to second that.
Vice Chair Harris.
So I ask a clarifying question,
Mhm.
of Commissioner Barnes. Are you being prescriptive that it should be obscure glass? Or are you saying they could do obscure glass or they could lift the sill heights?
No, only obscure glass. Obscure glass is the way through, not lifting the sill heights. But the remedy to this is to use obscure glass. So the bathroom windows need to have obscure glass.
Okay.
Is the motion.
I see Ms. Sandmeyer.
Yeah,
Is that
through the
our
chair.
cue? Is that our cue? Yes, Ms. Sandmeyer.
I just had a quick question for Commissioner Barnes. So the the motion would be for obscure glass just for the second story bathroom windows that are facing the sides. I think there's some windows facing the front of the primary bathroom.
Correct. The only windows that are subject are on the left and right elevation, second floor.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or discussion? Could I just ask the applicant their sentiment about that outcome? Is that acceptable? Is that a hardship? Is that difficult? Do you have an alternative that you think would meet the spirit but actually be better for your enjoyment of the property?
Just a matter of leaving it open to pick the type of obscure glass, because I know there are many types, as Commissioner Riggs pointed out, that we would be able to explore that with the homeowners with this condition.
There was nodding. I don't know. I think that sounds like it was the intent of both the maker and the potential seconder and the staff. Is that clear? If that's the way, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong staff person. Is that, is that clear?
Yeah.
All right, yes, it sounds like that's clear. Hang on a second. Ms. Felber, is that any other feedback or is?
The homeowners said that they would be fine with this condition to move forward.
Okay, Commissioner Shindley.
I am aware that it is possible to do obscure glass, not for the entirety of the pane. There's filming that's available where you can have obscure for a portion. And completely clear either on tops and bottoms. It's basically done as filming. Is that an option that we would put in there as an option, a third option? If it were, so it could be completely clear at the top and obscure sort of to the equivalence of the heights we were talking about?
I think that would look awful. It's just, design opinion, so.
All right,
Aesthetically, I agree. It does for consistency. You get a nice pane of glass, you get obscure glass, it looks very nice when it goes top to bottom when you cut it halfway.
I guess I'm visualizing that in some of these situations. Bathrooms, bedrooms, for instances, for the, desire for privacy from the residents, there's likely to be window coverage as well, window coverings, internal window coverings as well. So whatever we're talking about is incremental.
all right. Any other comments? And I'm afraid I've lost track here, but we do have a first, Commissioner Barnes with the 3 windows of obscure glass throughout, seconded by Commissioner Riggs, or no?
Seconded, I mean, obviously I had intended to have all the at-risk windows be addressed, but I think this is the most realistic option before this commission tonight.
All right, so that's a
So
second.
my second.
All right. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion before we go to a vote? Any clarifying questions? All right, and we'll go to the vote. Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Doe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs,
Yes.
Mr. Schindler.
Yes.
I will vote no. That's 5-1. The reason I'm voting no is that, back to the consistency, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate Commissioner Riggs's point. This would have been approved if it hadn't been a substandard lot. I also don't like being so prescriptive to an applicant in this situation. So I just want to clarify about why I was voting no, but it passes as proposed. Congratulations and best of luck getting back into your home. Thank you, Ms. Felber, and thank you to the owners.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right. That closes item F, which is the public hearing this evening. We move to item G, which is general business. We have item G1 before us. And this is to consider and adopt a resolution to approve architectural control for modifications to an existing office campus, including exterior and interior modifications to the existing fitness center, the addition of a sun deck at the existing restaurant, and hardscaping and landscaping modifications throughout the site, including the addition of 5 arbors at 3000 Sand Hill Road in the C1CX Administrative, Professional, and Research District Restrictive Conditional Development Permit zoning district. And with that, we're turning over to staff. Welcome, Mr. Chan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair DeCardi. So the item before you is this architectural control application at 3000 Sand Hill Road. I don't have any further updates to provide besides the staff report that you have already received. From the project team this evening, we have representatives from Ditco West, the property management, as well as the design team from Tech On Corp. I believe that they have prepared a presentation, and Virginia Culkins with Ditco West would be happy to intro that presentation for the commission.
Fabulous. Hang on just a moment. I'm going to see if there are any clarifying questions. Thank you for being with us, and then we'll turn to the Planning Commission. Any clarifying questions of staff before we turn to the applicant? All right, with that, thank you, Mr. Chen, and to the applicant, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. I am Virginia Calkins, and joining me here tonight from Divco West are Ben Elder, Brad Scott, and Steve Aberly. We at Divco West are long-term owners along Sandhill Road. We're committed to being an asset to the broader Menlo Park community. Tonight, we're pleased to be presenting a collection of small projects at the 3000 Sandhill Road campus, and we thank you for the opportunity to present for architectural control. These projects, they don't represent an increase to the campus population or a change of the use. Rather, they are strategic, low-scope, high-impact interventions aimed at improving sustainability, connecting the indoors and outdoors, and creating more usable open-air space. These plans are rooted in the land and inspired by our unique environment in Menlo Park. Our biophilic nature-based design principles align with many of the priorities we've observed in the city's general plan and other city planning priorities. As we welcome tenants back to the office in a post-COVID world, we want to better promote wellness. We want to offer an ecosystem with increased native habitat and invest in the resiliency of our built environment. I'd now like to introduce Jackson Durler of TechCon to review the projects in more detail. We selected TechCon for their regional experience and their expertise in native plant selection, drought-tolerant landscapes, and biophilic design. I'll turn it over to Jackson, and we'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of his presentation.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jackson Durler, landscape architect on the project. And before somebody from the city shared the presentation, should I be sharing it? There we go. Thank you so much. If you could skip to the next slide, that'd be helpful. Or I can. There we go. I've got control. All right. So the projects Virginia mentioned, we have 4 projects on the site. 2 of them being the courtyards between a building 3 courtyard and a building 4 courtyard. Then we've got a restaurant sun deck, we're calling it, a renovation of the fitness center, and then a small seating area off to the side of the campus. That's the overall campus site plan to get you the lay of the land. There we go. So building 3 courtyard. So building 3 and 4 courtyards are very similar. The goals of these were to improve the existing amenity spaces, to bring them back to a Class A office standard. There are already some small seating areas out there, but they're not very functional. They're very dated looking, and some of the plant materials overgrown, irrigation's not functioning properly. And so the goal of these is to take a space that's already there and just really improve upon it. Improving the circulation, the existing patio spaces for more functional, flexible workspaces, providing places for people as they come back to the office to eat an outdoor lunch, have an outdoor meeting, take a quick outdoor phone call, that type of thing. And then also just improve the general aesthetic of the property when you first get to the building, a nice wider entry walkway that goes up to it with nice enhanced pavers. Right now it's just concrete, and really just generally improving the space from an aesthetic standpoint. Building 4 is basically the same as building 3. It's just kind of a mirror copy of it. Slight changes just based on the existing building footprint. But again, the intent is to take an existing seating area that's currently there and make it a much more functional and attractive space. The other main thing we're doing is removing a significant portion of lawn that's out there. The fronts of both these buildings, 3 and 4, have fairly large lawns. So our intent is to remove those, replace with drought tolerant semi-native plant material and drip irrigation to help reduce water use on the campus. And then the fitness center, there's an existing fitness center on campus. You'd never know it if you drove by it. And so we want to make it more of a jewel box there. And so what we're doing is taking the existing building, keeping it the exact same footprint, but incorporating an outdoor patio space adjacent to it. So you have an indoor-outdoor working environment. So you can have this fully enclosed fitness center just outside the back of the building. And then again, removing the plant material that's outside, putting in drought tolerant plant material, drip irrigation, and then infilling some of the areas that are actually just bare soil right now with some attractive plant material. And then this we're calling the seating area. It's at the far west side of the campus, I guess it is. There's an existing seating area right there already. The intent is to improve it and make it more of a lasting and enduring space. Right now it's very flexible. There's seating kind of scattered throughout the mulch area, which the intent is to be able to keep that because the flexibility is very nice on that side of the campus, but also to make a more lasting and, like I said, enduring space to be an attractive landing area for people. And I think I skipped a slide on accident because it's not scrolling properly. So give me 1 second if I can scroll backwards. Here. So sorry. Right in the center of the campus, in the heart of the campus, we've got the sun deck. And the intent of the sun deck is to really prioritize an underutilized area at the center of the campus, adjacent to the restaurant, to create a real central location off the periphery for tenants to gather in a really safe and vibrant environment, surrounded by the beautiful campus landscape. So what we've done is incorporated a deck there that can be kind of interweaved throughout the existing landscape. It becomes a beautiful viewing deck, a nice place for people to sit. Again, as a gathering area for people that want to go back to the office, but you want to get outside every once in a while, go for a walk, take a phone call outside, eat your lunch out on the patio. The intent is that this gives you that space to do that. And those are all the seating areas. So I turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jackson. We're happy to answer any questions about the project intent or details of the design.
Terrific. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the presentation. Any clarifying questions for the applicant before we turn to public comment? All right, with that, why don't we go ahead, Mr. Turner, and turn to public comment on item G1.
Alrighty, if you would like to give public comments and you are participating via Zoom today, please go ahead and click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you are in person and would like to give public comment cards, please fill them out and call you up to the table. So at the moment, I do not see any hands raised. Maybe give it a second. If you are calling into today's meeting, please press *9 on your keypad. Hands.
All right. So, seeing nobody in the room, and I'm smiling because it is only the commission and staff in the room at this time, and seeing no hands, I'll go ahead and close public comment on this item and bring it back to the dais for commissioners for questions or comments and ultimately a motion. Commissioner Barnes.
Thank you, Chair DeCarty. Question, and I apologize that I don't know this. What is through the chair to the applicant, what is the restaurant that is on site? What's the name of it?
There's an existing restaurant there. It's called Restaurant 3000. Not known for its creative name, but it is an existing restaurant not changed as a part of this application.
Does it serve primarily folks who work on campus or adjacent properties? Tell me a little bit more about what it is.
Yeah, it's technically a public restaurant, and the campus, you can walk on and eat there, but it's primarily used by tenants sort of buying a sandwich for lunch type of thing.
And what is the square footage of the restaurant?
I don't know it offhand. Jackson, do you know?
Yes, it is. 3,105 square feet.
In line with the name, so
I'll plan.
And then what is the square footage of the restaurant sun deck?
The actual deck itself,
Yes.
I can get that for you. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
while he's getting that, just to not a part of the restaurant itself. People will be able to go and eat there, buy a sandwich and go eat there, but they'll also be able to take a phone call there if they're not going to the restaurant. It's sort of a public shared amenity, the deck itself.
Got it, thank you. While he's looking for that, it's not particularly, I was just looking for some proportionality, but that's not exactly germane to my approval or disapproval. I look at this and I think what's not to like. This project exceeds the minimum landscaping open space development standards of CDP. Clearly, they're improving, whether it is the fitness center or the seating area or the landscaping, hardscaping, entry of the courtyard. So I won't pick up all the motions tonight, but I would say, should someone make a motion, I have no other comments related to this other than it seems like a very nice enhancement to an existing property.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes.
It'll come, I guess, in due time.
So if you can find the answer to his question, he's still interested.
Yes, I thought someone's digging. I saw the
Okay.
papers. being
Okay.
brought up, so,
I've got it.
But
It's
we,
2,900 square feet.
all right,
got it. Thank you.
okay,
Yep.
thank you. Other commissioners, questions or comments? Can I ask a question? I'm interested in the community outreach and mentioned that there was going to be a pickleball court and then there's not. I wondered what the feedback was that made the pickleball court go away, and was there other feedback relevant to the types of improvements you were considering?
Yeah, so we have a neighboring homeowners association housing that sort of abuts the property on the back side, and it was near where the proposed pickleball court was. And some representatives from DivCo did meet with the HOA, and the HOA expressed some concern about the noise associated with pickleball. I don't think we're the first community kind of raising that question. So we asked our tenants if they were interested in badminton, which is a lot quieter, and they're not. So we got rid of the pickleball court, and I think that's the primary concern from the HOA, really noise. And so once that was removed, they were supportive of the remainder of the project.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Commissioner Doe.
Thank you. I just have a small follow-up question. I'm not sure the sound difference between pickleball and basketball, but is basketball a problem? Isn't there an existing basketball?
There is an existing basketball court. I don't think it gets, a ton of use, and I think it doesn't have quite the annoying thwack that seems to be associated with pickleball.
Thanks, I was just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question.
All right. Other questions, other comments, or ultimately we're moving toward a motion here this evening? I'm with Commissioner Barnes. I find this eminently supportable myself, so I have no further questions. Commissioner Doe?
I echo the same sentiments. The outdoor rooms are lovely for extending the workspace into the outdoors. So I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve as submitted from Commissioner Doe. Any comments, questions, or a second? Vice Chair Harris?
Yeah, I would like to echo all that's been said, but also I appreciate taking out lawns that need to be watered and putting in something that is better environmentally and saving our water. So I would like to second the motion by Commissioner Doe.
All right, with that first and a second, any comments, questions before moving to a vote? All right, seeing none, Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Doe,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs. Commissioner Schindler.
Yes.
I will also vote yes, so the motion passes 6-0 with those present. Congratulations, good luck putting the project together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well. With that, we'll close item G1. We'll move now to item G2 on our agenda this evening. This is to review the draft 2023 Planning Commission meeting dates. There's a staff report. Any staff comment or setup on this? Sam, Mike.
Yes, good evening. I don't have any updates to the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Ms. Sandmeyer? So we are voting to approve this. And then the expectation is that we come, I believe that's how this goes. So any questions or comments? Vice Chair Harris?
I have actually two questions. One is, are you looking for us to say whether there are any dates that are conflicts such that we can find out if there are dates that many of us cannot make, or are you not interested in that at this time? That's my first.
That's a question to Sandmeyer.
Yes, yeah, if there's dates that any commissioners know they cannot attend for certain, I think that'll be useful, because then we can see if maybe there wouldn't be a quorum. That would be important to know.
Okay. And then my second question is, I noted that there is a plan for a special joint meeting of the Housing Commission and the Planning Commission on 1/12/23. And my question is, what is the purpose of that meeting? What are you looking for from the Planning Commission for that meeting?
Yeah, the idea for that meeting is for recommendation on the housing element.
Okay.
So there is one meeting on November 14th in 1 week on the housing element, but that wouldn't be for a formal recommendation to the city council. So the joint meeting would be the final time that the proposed housing element and the other parts of the general plan update would be going to the Planning Commission.
So just to clarify, we would be working towards a motion of what is going to be then presented back to HCD following the letter to us? Or is it more, we're going to be approving Menlo Park City Council housing element?
Can I try to do something here? Just to, if you're okay, Vice Chair Harris?
Yes.
Can we have that conversation under the next item when we have clarifying questions about upcoming items on the agenda?
That would be great, because my next question for the next one is, what are we doing on November 14th?
So let's do that in that next agenda item, and then this would be germane. So I have the same question on the 12th, but I think if that's the answer, that probably serves for this purpose. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. And then so then you had those are your two questions, or you had another?
Yes, and I didn't know how,
okay.
how, if you would like to poll us or how you would like to do that.
Yeah, so Ms. Sandmeyer, you said that if people knew they had conflicts with specific dates, I assume you don't want all commissioners to get out their calendars and start doing this in real time, or do you?
Just if anything is known right now, and I think part of it is maybe if there's some kind of school holiday or other holiday that staff isn't aware of, it could come up in this meeting, but I mean, certainly we wouldn't expect commissioners to know all conflicts for next year.
So commissioners can be thinking on that if they have something they know for sure, something they want to raise, or something they think may have conflicts with other folks. Are there other questions relative to this schedule? For people right now?
Has this been cross-checked against the 49ers Monday night football schedule?
Cross-checked against the football schedule on Monday night.
Just the 49ers.
Others
Wait.
may have other opinions. So Ms. Emmer, I do have a question along those lines, but actually I'm legitimately curious, which is we have Christian holidays, we've noted Jewish holidays that is scheduled around. What is the thinking of staff about holidays from other faith traditions and how are those taken into consideration in setting this calendar?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for now, we've kind of followed the way we've traditionally done it, but certainly, you know, that's something we could look at for future calendars or for this calendar. And I think certainly as demographics change, we can update what we look at. The idea is to have conflicts for the fewest residents.
Yeah, you are taking your guidance about how to set this calendar from city policy that I assume is set by city council or the city manager in some way. Is that how has the decision been made about what to take into consideration for this calendar? I mean, you're operating under guidance, or is this actually at the sole discretion of the planning department to make this calendar recommendation?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have that information. And if it's the preference of the commission, we can certainly bring this back on December 5th, looking at additional holidays from different faiths. If that's the direction, that would be fine.
Is that a hardship to you to bring it back with that? Or is there a problem not having this set within this month?
No, I don't think there's a hardship for staff. I know some commissioners have previously said they would like to see the calendar earlier, and I think usually we've brought it in December, so now we brought it a little earlier, but that also gives us leeway to bring it back another time.
I don't want to, I mean, I'm interested to know how other faith traditions are considered. I don't have an opinion one way or the other about what should or should not be changed. But that is just the preference of one person here, so absent any other comments, I'd leave that at your discretion, or we could see if what other commissioners think. But that's the extent of my questions about the calendar. Otherwise, it's fine to me. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? And ultimately, are we entertaining a motion here, or are you just getting feedback and then this is considered done?
So there could be a motion, kind of formal motion first, second, and vote, or it can just come in as feedback from individual commissioners, and then we can approve it administratively. And certainly if there's other religious holidays to consider, that would be important feedback.
Given that direction, I suppose I would suggest that if we allow you to approve this administratively in time to inform us at the first planning commission meeting in December, that would give time for planning commissioners to check their calendar and to let you know if they have any particular conflict with a specific date. So you'd have that answered. And then you can answer as you see fit my question about other potential holidays from different faith traditions. So Vice Chair Harris.
Maybe one suggestion would be that if you ask us via email if there are any dates they can't make, and then that we don't have to bring it back up again. We don't have to go through everything.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was what I was suggesting, is that individual commissioners would follow up by email directly and only to Ms. Sandmeyer, not to everybody, between now and whatever, a couple of weeks, so that staff can get this finalized and back to us at the beginning of December. Commissioner Riggs?
Is the intent of the chair's request regarding other faith holidays to ask staff to survey the town, given that the goal, if I understand it, is to set hearing dates where the least number of people would be impacted by that chosen date. Would you be asking them to determine if there are other faiths that are dominant in terms of their reserved holidays in Menlo Park?
So I don't have an opinion about how to do it. I just think it should be thought about, and I would like to be informed that it's been considered and that found by some reason of assessment that the decision was made to come back with this recommendation. That's all I'm asking.
And you want to limit it to faith as opposed to other associations?
So the items that were called out on this calendar were Christian holidays and Jewish holidays. So that would be faith traditions. So for me, I was looking at faith traditions because there are many that have many different faith traditions. I was not suggesting that it needed to broaden out for my interest in understanding consistency. So that's where I was with my curiosity. If other commissioners would like to suggest expanding that out in some way, or if you would like to, that's of course feedback, but that was not my intent.
Well, I thought if the goal is to assure the greatest availability of the attendees, that the reason for the Christian holidays would be the prevalence of people observing them. And a similar reason could be for the Jewish holidays. So beyond that, I know my knowledge is limited about what the demographics are and who observes what holidays more strictly. I'm told certain holidays by a couple of friends, they simply gloss over. They call them placeholder holidays or mirror holidays. You have this holiday, therefore we have this holiday, but we don't observe it. So if the goal is to maximize the number of attendees, do we want to ask staff to clarify that they are successfully using the right metrics for maximizing? Rather than just taking the cue that the two mentioned so far by staff happen to be religious oriented. Religions do tend, I guess, to be the larger organizations, but there are other associations. The reason I'm prompting you is that I am cognizant of the limited time at the planning division. And before giving them an additional task, I thought at the very least we could define it narrowly enough so that this is something that in relatively short hours, your question could be answered.
Ms. Sandmeyer, is I put that question to you. Was my request to at least review thoughts of major holidays from other faith traditions, one that seems difficult to review and to take a look at? Do you need better or clearer direction from me on what I'm interested in?
I would say it's clear to me. I guess one question I had is whether you would like staff just to kind of review other potential conflict dates and then bring the calendar to a December meeting, or just to look at dates and then administratively approve the calendar and send it out just via email.
For me, I would be fine for the staff to administratively approve the calendar, having assured that you've taken a look at this and considered it in some way. If this is the first time this has been done, then that's fabulous, and it doesn't need to boil the ocean, but I think it would be a nice step to recognize. Commissioner Riggs, you asked me, some direct questions. I will say that one of my goals as chair of the Planning Commission is to make sure that every single member of our community feels comfortable coming to a Planning Commission meeting. whether they've been here before and they understand our complicated rules about how to use property in depth, or whether they don't have much of a sense of all at all on this, that they should feel welcome. And I think one of the signals that we send about welcoming are things like this, so that people can either identify and see themselves reflected in things like calendars or in like minutes or in how things are presented. And if they don't, then that can feel difficult for them in that mix. So I will be clear that my intent is I believe that that makes us a more welcoming community, to at least have said that there has been a look at other faith traditions and some recognition in that mix. But I am not describing that it needs to lead to a massive change, but it may in fact open up something that's a fairly simple fix. And that may be something that some members of our community would then be able to feel more welcomed in this meeting, which I believe is important. And therefore, that's why I was asking as an alternate.
Yeah, thank you. I think that'll be, I think that's great direction for us to look into it a little more. And then we'll update the calendar as needed.
All right, so at the moment, the proposal is for the staff to do that, for commissioners independently to email if they know they have conflicts with particular dates. That way, if there was a number of us, staff could make that adjustment now as opposed to having to scramble at the end. And it will come back to us having been administratively approved, and we'll be informed in December. So that's where we are at the moment. Other questions or a preferred way forward? Vice Chair Hare.
That sounds terrific. And I also wanted to just say that I appreciate getting the calendar out to us earlier. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that side of that. I think I might have been the one that asked last year, so I appreciate the calendar coming out earlier. I think that's really helpful for our planning.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, Ms. Sandmar, you have the direction you need from us?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right, with that, I will close item G2. That ends the regular business meeting, and we'll move to item H this evening, which is informational items. And for that, I'm turning back to you, Ms. Sandmar.
Yes, so we have the meeting next Monday, 11/14, focusing on the housing element. And Mr. Chan is here, who I think can provide us a little more background as he's working on that project.
Thank you, Karina. So the meeting on November 14th will be an opportunity for the Planning Commission as well as the public to review the draft subsequent environmental impact report, or draft SEIR, for the housing element update project. So as an update, on November 4th, so last Friday, we released the draft SEIR, and that begins the 45-day comment period, which runs from November 4th through December 19th. So during this 45-day comment period, we would like to bring to the Planning Commission an opportunity to provide feedback on the draft subsequent environmental impact report, as well as to further publicize to the public the availability of this document. In addition to reviewing the draft environmental review document, there will also be, we're still working through what those details are, but a discussion on potential rezoning as well as improvements to our affordable housing overlay.
And
So is that like a study session?
Kind of like a study session to get your feedback on some preliminary ideas that we're working through.
I'm sorry,
That's
Vice
next
Chair.
week.
Yeah, this is November 14th.
November 14th, yes.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Harris. I spoke again.
through the chair, but question for staff. So if, so we'll be getting a staff report this week that's going to talk a little bit about the BMR potential change to BMR overlay and rezoning.
We're still working through what the study session component would be, but definitely changes to the affordable housing overlay is an item of discussion.
Okay.
We're not sure if we're ready to bring it forward to the commission for feedback on November 14th, but we're working towards that right now. But definitely the environmental review document will be provided and discussed with the commission.
Okay. And then likely we'll have the staff report with whatever you feel is ready Thursday.
Later this week.
Wednesday.
We are,
Tomorrow.
we're working intimately with our
I
consultant
would
team to put
imagine. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question, just, or I can ask it around the item, but This is an SEIR around the housing element. Is it appended to something else that is serving as a program EIR, or is this a standalone EIR? If it's standalone EIR, does it serve in some way as a program EIR for something else that is coming down the road?
It's a program EIR off of our 2016 general plan update.
Thank you. So a program EIR off of our update in 2016 that will essentially be the baseline EIR for development that will then come to us specific development against that housing element over the course of time.
Over the planning period and housing element.
Thank you. Okay.
Through the chair.
Yes.
What is a supplemental, I'm sorry, BMR overlay?
The affordable housing overlay. So that's part of the city's already existing inclusionary housing requirements. So as part of the housing element update, there are some proposed changes to that to strengthen incentives and different densities to bring about more affordable housing choice.
What's the genesis for that? What was a collector of information to come up with best practices or thoughts around it?
I think it's come from a variety of sources, some from this commission themselves, the Housing Commission, members of the public, with direction from the City Council. Throughout the course of our housing element update, we've done focus groups, interviews with affordable housing developers. And it's taking all the information that we've collected up to this point, as well as feedback from the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and taking that feedback and trying to put it into a way that improves on what we have right now to encourage a variety of housing choices at different income levels.
Overlay generally refers to, for instance, you've zone in and you have specific areas, do an overlay, for instance, for a specific plan. And then is it using overlay in that context, or using it to reference specific changes to the BMR ordinance in the city?
So our current affordable housing overlay applies to certain parcels throughout the city. And what we're looking at to improve with the affordable housing overlay is to expand on that applicability, as well as the extent to which our current regulations incentivize affordable housing today. So adding to what we have today to make affordable housing stronger.
And sorry for my clarification. So there's specific language within the ordinance, and then it'll point to specific areas of the city. Is it a two-part thing when you say overlay?
So the applicability of the AHO, or the affordable housing overlay, will be parcel specific.
Okay.
We're still working through whether or not that's like entire zones, or if it's by APN, or a combination of both. So those are some things that you'll see before you next week, and we welcome your feedback.
And that'll be paired with potential language in changes to the ordinance itself.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any informational items? This is November 14th. Any other questions about upcoming calendar items, or any other questions of Ms. Sandmeyer? Yes.
Do we know whether the Hotel Moxie review that somewhere I read is also scheduled to occur on the 14th is still happening as part of the agenda of that meeting?
Yes, that's correct. So we'll have Hotel Moxie and then the housing element item. And then we will, the next meeting, because of Thanksgiving, will be December 5th. So we haven't finalized those items yet.
Vice Chair Harris.
So I'd like to bring us back to my question about the 12th of January. And also, will we be revisiting the housing element between this meeting on the 14th and the meeting with the Housing Commission on the 12th of January?
No, I believe those are the two meetings. Is that correct?
I guess what I'm asking is, what is our purview from the Planning Commission for the housing element? What is our, what are we tasked with doing for the housing element? I heard about the EIR and potentially the rezoning and BMR overlay. If we get to that on the 14th, if we don't, presumably we would be revisiting that sometime later in December. What else is in our purview as planning commissioners for completing the housing element by the end of January?
Yeah, if I could just, sorry. I just want to quickly make sure we're not getting too much into the discussion because this isn't on the agenda. I think for information, I really appreciate the questions and I think these are great questions, but just for the informational items, I don't want to get too much into the kind of policy questions since those aren't on the agenda.
Sam, I did not, I'll say myself, I didn't see it as a policy question. It's exactly the question I have, which is, it's on the agenda for the 14th, that's the SEIR, but if it's on the agenda for January 12th with joint with the Housing Commission, I believe Vice Chair Harris's question was, what will we be asked to do at that meeting on the 12th? Is that a fair
my question.
summary?
Given that it's already planned and we're going to be meeting with the Housing Commission, I just want to have a sense for what it is that we're going to be doing. What is our job?
Okay, yeah, I think that will be the recommendation. And I don't know, Calvin, if you have more to add, but I think it's basically the recommendation to the city council.
That's correct. So the January 12th meeting, January 12th, 2023 meeting that we're scheduling right now is hopefully a joint meeting between this body, the Planning Commission, as well as the Housing Commission, to review and make a recommendation to the city council for adoption of the housing element update.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
I actually have a follow-up question, which is, what is the thinking about combining those as opposed to having those being separate and sequential? We've had other times when the Housing Commission has had a meeting first and we've then been informed by their discussion as it comes to us. So that putting this together is for what purpose?
As we're looking at the calendar for the housing element update between now and January and the time that it takes for us to revise the documents in response to our HCD letter, we are thinking that a joint meeting between the both bodies is really our only opportunity between now and then to get it on the calendar. The Housing Commission meets once a month at the beginning of the month, the Planning Commission meets twice, and this special meeting in looking out and gaming out our different timelines for deliverables. This was the date that we proposed that could work.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Any other questions or items for staff? I have a completely separate one. I just wanted to note that in both F1 and F2 tonight, we had really good examples in the attachments that showed the extent and the type of neighborhood outreach. It was F3 attachment and item F1 tonight, and it was E4 and F2, and both of them, for me, for the first time, allowed us to actually see geographically where they were located and what the feedback was. I just want to say I found those really helpful. I know this has been something Commissioner Barnes has asked about over time, and I appreciate him asking about feedback, and I thought that that type of presentation was great. I just wanted to thank staff and the applicants for having done that. Found it helpful. Any other feedback or questions for staff this evening? All right, with that, I will close item H, which moves us to adjournment, which I will do, and I will thank staff and the applicants and members of the public tonight for working through this hybrid meeting and for everybody for coming. It was a good first run. It's great to be in person. I hope that we can make that happen and more people can come in the future. And with that, we are adjourned and we will see you in a week. All right.
Smoother than that.
You guys did
Right.
great.
I did not see
this.
this attendance coming. I thought I'm gonna be here.
I know. I was
Yelling into the
Exactly.
Is the recording still on?
mic.